They always said I was the strong one, the backbone of the family, the one who held everyone together. But strength, I learned, can be mistaken for weakness when people start believing you'll never break. I'm Eleanor, 72 years old, and for decades I've been the glue that kept my family intact. 3 children, Michael, Jennifer, and David, all grown, all successful in their own ways. I raised them alone after my husband Thomas passed when they were still young. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to make sure they had everything they needed. I never complained. I never asked for recognition. I just did what mothers do. But last month, during what was supposed to be a joyful family gathering at my home, I overheard something that shattered my entire world. Something that made me question every sacrifice I'd ever made. My children, the people I'd given my entire life to, were standing in my kitchen laughing as Jennifer said those words that would haunt me for weeks. She needs us more than we need her. The others laughed. Actually laughed. As if my dependence on them was some kind of joke. As if the woman who'd raised them single-handedly had somehow become a burden they tolerated out of obligation. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand clutching the wall for support, listening as they discussed me like I was a problem to be managed rather than their mother. That moment changed everything. Because they were wrong. So incredibly, devastatingly wrong. And I was about to prove it. Let me take you back to the beginning to help you understand how we got here. Thomas died 38 years ago in a car accident. One moment we were planning our future, talking about the trip we'd take once the kids were older. And the next moment I was a widow at 34 with 3 children under 10. Michael was 9, Jennifer was 7, and David was barely 5 years old. I remember standing at Thomas's grave, holding David's small hand, watching my other 2 children cry, and thinking, I cannot fall apart. They need me to be strong. So that's what I became. Strong. Unbreakable. The person everyone could lean on because I never bent, never broke. I worked as a secretary during the day and cleaned offices at night. On weekends, I did bookkeeping for small businesses from home. Every penny went toward keeping our modest house and giving my children opportunities one never had. Michael wanted to play soccer? I found a way. Jennifer needed supplies for her art classes? I made it happen. David showed promise in mathematics? I hired a tutor even when it meant I ate pasta for dinner 4 nights a week. They never saw me struggle. That was important to me. I wanted them to feel secure, to believe that even without their father, they had everything they needed. I attended every game, every recital, every parent-teacher conference. I helped with homework until midnight and still woke up at 5 to get ready for work. I made their favorite meals, threw them birthday parties, and made sure they never felt the absence of their father as a lack of love. When Michael got into college, I was so proud. He wanted to study business, had dreams of running his own company someday. The scholarship covered most of it, but not all. I took out a loan to cover the rest. Then Jennifer got into art school in New York. More loans. David went to MIT for mathematics. I was working 3 jobs by then, barely sleeping, but I didn't care. Their success was my success. They all graduated. They all got good jobs. Michael started his own consulting firm. Jennifer became a successful graphic designer. David worked for a tech company making more money than I'd ever seen in my life. I was so proud of them. So incredibly proud. But somewhere along the way things started to shift. It was subtle at first. Phone calls became less frequent. Visits became shorter. They were busy, of course. They had careers, relationships, their own lives. I understood that. I never wanted to be the kind of mother who demanded attention, who made her children feel guilty for living their own lives. But then the tone changed. The way they spoke to me changed. Started about 5 years ago. Michael had married a woman named Vanessa, and they had 2 children, my grandchildren Tyler and Emma. I adored those kids. I'd drive 2 hours every month to visit them, bringing homemade cookies and little gifts. I'd offer to babysit whenever they needed. I just wanted to be part of their lives. But Vanessa made it clear I was more of an inconvenience than a help. Eleanor, we have a schedule for the children, she'd say in that crisp, condescending tone. We prefer not to disrupt it. When I'd offer to help with anything, she'd decline with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Michael never defended me. He'd just nod along with whatever Vanessa said, as if his mother's feelings didn't matter. As if the woman who'd sacrificed everything for him was now just an obligation to be managed. Jennifer was different but equally distant. She'd moved to New York and become immersed in what she called the art scene. She'd come home maybe twice a year, usually for major holidays, and even then she seemed distracted, always on her phone, always talking about her projects and clients. When I'd try to have a real conversation, ask her about her life, her feelings, she'd give me surface-level answers and change the subject. "Mom, you wouldn't understand," she'd say when I asked about her work. "It's a different world." As if I was too simple, too suburban, too ordinary to comprehend her sophisticated life. David, my youngest, was perhaps the most hurtful. He'd been my baby, the one who'd clung to me the longest after his father died. We'd had a special bond, or so I thought. But success changed him. He moved to Seattle, bought an expensive condo, and started dating a woman named Clarissa who seemed to think she was superior to everyone, including me. When I visited them once, Clarissa actually suggested I might be more comfortable staying at a hotel rather than in their guest room. "We value our privacy," she'd said, as if I was some intrusive stranger rather than David's mother. And David? He just stood there, nodding, not saying a word in my defense. I started to feel it then, the shift from being needed to being tolerated. But I pushed those feelings down. They were my children. They loved me. They were just busy, I told myself. This was normal. This was what happened when children grew up and built their own lives. I kept showing up, kept calling, kept trying to be part of their lives. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts. I remembered every important date. I offered help whenever I could. I never stopped being their mother. But they were slowly stopping being my children. About 3 years ago, I had a health scare. I found a lump in my breast and had to have surgery. Turned out to be benign, thank God, but it was terrifying. I was in the hospital for 3 days. Called Michael first. "That's tough, Mom," he said. "But I'm sure you'll be fine. You're strong. You always are." He didn't offer to come. He didn't ask if I needed anything. He just assumed I'd handle it alone because I always did. Jennifer was in the middle of a big project. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry, but I really can't get away right now. This client is so demanding. But you're tough. You've got this." David said he'd try to come but then called the day before my surgery to say work had gotten crazy and he couldn't make it. "You understand, right, Mom? This is a really important time for my career." I had the surgery alone. I recovered alone. My neighbor Patricia, a woman I'd only known for a few years, was the one who drove me home from the hospital. She was the one who checked on me, brought me meals, made sure I was healing properly. Not my children. Not the people I'd given my entire life to. That should have been my wake-up call. But I made excuses for them. They were busy. They had their own lives. They didn't realize how scared I'd been. I didn't want to burden them with my fears. I was still strong, Eleanor. I could handle anything. But the truth was starting to creep in, settling into my bones like a cold I couldn't shake. To them, I was no longer a person with needs and feelings. I was just Mom, the one who was always fine, always there, always strong enough to not need anything from anyone. The incidents kept accumulating, each one a small cut that individually didn't seem like much but collectively were bleeding me dry. There was the Christmas 2 years ago when I spent weeks planning a family gathering at my house. I bought everyone's favorite foods, decorated the house beautifully, wrapped thoughtful presents I'd spent months selecting. Michael's family showed up 3 hours late because they decided to visit Vanessa's parents first. They stayed for barely an hour before announcing they needed to get the kids home for bedtime. Jennifer didn't come at all. She texted me on Christmas Eve to say she'd been invited to a holiday party in the Hamptons with some important clients and couldn't miss it. "You understand, right, Mom? This could really help my career." David came, but Clarissa complained the entire time. The house was too warm. The food wasn't her dietary preference. She was allergic to my cat, which I'd had for 12 years. They left before dinner was even served. I sat alone at my dining table that night, looking at all the food I'd prepared, all the decorations I'd hung, all the presents still under the tree, and cried. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. Because the truth was undeniable. I had become invisible to them. Then there was David's birthday last year. I drove 5 hours to Seattle because he'd mentioned casually that he was having a small dinner party. I assumed I was invited. I was his mother. I brought a homemade cake, his favorite chocolate layer cake with cream cheese frosting that I'd made from scratch, the same recipe I'd been making for his birthday since he was 6 years old. When I arrived at his condo, Clarissa opened the door with a look of surprise that bordered on horror. "Eleanor? What are you doing here?" "It's David's birthday," I said, confused. "I brought his cake." She glanced back into the apartment where I could hear laughter and music. "This is actually an adult gathering," she said, actually blocking the doorway with her body. "We weren't expecting. I mean, David didn't mention you were coming." David appeared behind her. "Mom? Oh, Mom, I didn't know you were driving up." "You mentioned your party," I said, feeling my face flush with embarrassment. "I thought. This is more of a friend's thing," he said, not meeting my eyes. "But thanks for the cake. You didn't have to do that." He took the cake from my hands, and Clarissa started to close the door. "We'll call you tomorrow, Eleanor," she said, as if that made up for shutting the door in my face. I stood in the hallway of his expensive condo building, listening to the party inside, hearing my son laugh with people he'd chosen over his own mother, and felt something crack inside me. But I still made excuses. He'd forgotten to tell me it was a friends-only party. It was a misunderstanding. These things happen. I drove 5 hours home alone, crying most of the way. The pattern continued. Michael asked me to babysit Tyler and Emma one weekend because he and Vanessa wanted to go on a romantic getaway. I was thrilled. Finally, I could spend real time with my grandchildren. I rearranged my entire schedule, planned activities, bought craft supplies. 2 days before I was supposed to go to their house, Michael called. "Actually, Mom, Vanessa's mother is coming to town, and she really wants to watch the kids. You understand, right? Maybe next time." There was never a next time. Jennifer called me once, excited, talking rapidly about a gallery show where her work was being featured. "It's a really big deal, Mom. Some important collectors will be there." She talked for 20 minutes about the event, and I felt hopeful maybe she wanted me to come to share this important moment with her. But she never invited me. She just wanted someone to talk at, and I was available to listen like I always was. When I saw photos of the event on social media later, I saw her posing with various people, including an older woman she'd tagged as her mentor and inspiration. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'd supported her art since she was a child, bought her first real art supplies, encouraged her when everyone else said art wasn't a practical career. But I wasn't important enough to be at her big moment. Each incident alone could be explained away, but together they painted a clear picture. I had become someone they called when they needed something, someone they kept at arm's length, someone whose feelings were never a priority. But I kept trying, because that's what I'd always done. I was strong, Eleanor. I didn't give up on the people I loved. About 6 months ago, I started noticing something else. When I'd call Michael, he'd often sound irritated, like I was interrupting something important. Our conversations became shorter, more transactional. "Hey, Mom, can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something." He rarely called back. Jennifer stopped answering my calls altogether. I'd leave messages that went unreturned for days, sometimes weeks. When she finally responded, it was usually with a text. "Sorry, been crazy busy. We'll call soon." She never did. David at least answered sometimes, but I could hear the impatience in his voice. Once, when I was telling him about Patricia's daughter who just had a baby, he interrupted me. "Mom, I have to go. Was there something you needed?" As if I needed a reason to talk to my own son. As if a mother calling to chat with her child was an inconvenience. I started to pull back a little to see if they'd notice. I stopped calling as often. Stopped always being the one to reach out. Stopped sending random care packages and thinking of you cards. They didn't notice. Or if they did, they seemed relieved. That's when Patricia, over coffee one afternoon, said something that struck me. "Eleanor, do you ever feel like you're the only one putting in effort with your kids?" I'd laughed it off, made excuses for them. But Patricia shook her head. "I'm not trying to interfere, but from the outside it seems like you're always giving and they're always taking. When was the last time one of them asked how you were doing? Really asked and waited for a real answer?" I couldn't remember. "When was the last time they thanked you for everything you've done for them?" I couldn't remember that either. "Eleanor, you're one of the kindest, most selfless people I know. But kindness shouldn't mean letting people treat you like you don't matter. Her words stayed with me, echoing in my mind during sleepless nights. Was I letting them treat me like I didn't matter? Or worse, had I taught them that I didn't matter by never asking for anything, never showing them that I had needs too? I decided to test something. I stopped reaching out completely. No calls. No texts. No cards. I wanted to see how long it would take for them to notice to reach out to me. 3 weeks passed. Nothing. 4 weeks. Nothing. On week 5, Jennifer texted, "Hey Mom. Hope you're good. Been thinking about you." But she didn't call. Didn't ask why I hadn't been in touch. Just a quick text to assuage her guilt, probably. Week 6, Michael called. But it wasn't to check on me. "Hey Mom, quick question. Do you still have those old photo albums from when we were kids? Vanessa wants them for some family history project." He wanted something. That's why he called. David never reached out at all. That's when I started to see the truth clearly. I wasn't a person to them anymore. I was a resource. I was the woman who'd always be there, always be strong, always be available when they needed something. But my feelings, my needs, my life, those didn't factor into their calculations. I felt something hardening inside me. Not quite anger yet, but something close to it. Something that felt like self-preservation. Then came the family gathering that changed everything. Michael called me 2 months ago. "Mom, we're thinking of having a family dinner at your place. It's been a while since we all got together." I should have been happy. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? All my children together in my home spending time together. But something about the way he said it felt off. Like it wasn't really about spending time together. Like there was another agenda. But I agreed. Of course I agreed. I was still, despite everything, hopeful that maybe things could change. Maybe this would be a turning point. I spent a week preparing. I deep cleaned the house. I planned a menu with everyone's favorites. I bought wine, made sure I had activities for the grandchildren. Even set up the guest rooms in case anyone wanted to stay over. The day arrived. Michael and his family showed up first. Vanessa breezed in with barely a greeting, immediately criticizing my furniture arrangement. "It's so cramped in here, Eleanor. Have you thought about downsizing? You really don't need this much space." Jennifer arrived next, looking distracted, already on her phone. She hugged me absently and immediately started talking about her latest client drama. Not asking how I was or even commenting on the effort I'd clearly put into preparing for them. David and Clarissa were last. Clarissa walked in, looked around my home. The home I'd raised 3 children in. The home filled with memories and love, and wrinkled her nose. "It's so dated in here. You should really consider renovating." Not "thank you for having us." Not "the house looks nice." Just criticism. Dinner was tense. I'd made everyone's favorite dishes, but Clarissa announced she was doing keto now, and couldn't eat most of what I'd prepared. Vanessa let Tyler and Emma play on tablets at the table instead of interacting with anyone. Jennifer spent half the meal responding to work emails on her phone. I tried to start conversations to connect with them, but everything fell flat. When I asked Michael about his business, he gave one-word answers. When I asked Jennifer about her art, she said, "You wouldn't understand the technical aspects, Mom." When I tried to talk to David about his work, Clarissa interrupted to tell a long story about their recent vacation to Bali that no one else seemed interested in. After dinner, I started clearing the table. No one offered to help. They all migrated to the living room, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I could hear them talking, their voices drifting in, and something made me stop moving, made me stand very still and listen. "So when are we going to talk to her about it?" That was Vanessa's voice. "Talk to me about what?" I almost called out, but something held me back. "I think we need to approach this carefully," Michael said. "You know how Mom is. She'll resist any change." "But it's getting ridiculous," Clarissa said. "She's living in this big house all alone. It's not practical. And honestly, the neighborhood isn't even that nice anymore. Plus, think about what we could do with the equity," Vanessa added. "We could help her find a nice little apartment somewhere. She doesn't need 4 bedrooms for just herself." My heart started pounding. They were talking about my house. About me moving. "I mean, she's not getting any younger," Jennifer said. "What if something happens to her here? What if she falls or has a health issue? She really should be somewhere smaller, easier to manage. Or even an assisted living place, Clarissa suggested. They have some really nice ones now, with activities and stuff. She'd probably make friends. Let's not go that far yet, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. But yeah, I think downsizing makes sense for her. The thing is, she's going to act like we're attacking her, Michael said. But we have to make her understand we're worried about her. This is for her own good. She needs us more than we need her, Jennifer said, and then laughed. I mean, what's she going to do, get mad and cut us off? She'd never do that. They all laughed. All of them. Laughing at the idea that I might stand up for myself. Laughing at the thought that I might have boundaries. Laughing because they assumed I'd always be there, always be available, always put up with whatever they decided was best for me without considering what I wanted. She'll come around, Michael said confidently. She always does. Mom's a survivor. She'll adapt. And really think about it practically, Vanessa added. She's 72. She's retired. She doesn't need this much space. We could help her sell, maybe even find her something closer to one of us so we can keep an eye on her. The way she said that last part, I could hear the air quotes in her voice. I think the key is to make her believe it's her idea, David said. You know how she is about her independence. We have to be strategic. They were discussing me like I was a problem to solve. Like I was a child who needed to be manipulated for her own good. They were plotting to take my home, the home I'd worked 3 jobs to keep, the home I'd raised them in, the home filled with memories of their father, and they were doing it because it would be convenient for them. Not because I needed help. I was perfectly capable of maintaining my house. I was healthy, active, independent. They wanted my house so they could benefit from it financially. And they assumed I'd just go along with it because I always went along with everything. Because I was strong, adaptable Eleanor who never made waves, never caused problems, never demanded to be treated with respect. She needs us more than we need her. Those words kept echoing in my mind. And suddenly, standing in my kitchen, eavesdropping on my own children as they plotted against me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Anger. Pure righteous anger. Because they were wrong. They were so completely, utterly wrong. I didn't need them. I had been fine before they started pulling away, and I'd be fine if they disappeared tomorrow. But they had built their entire lives on the foundation I'd provided. Every opportunity they'd had, every success they'd achieved, had been possible because I'd sacrificed everything to give them those chances. And now they thought I was the dependent one? They thought they were doing me a favor by tolerating my presence in their lives? I stood in that kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white, and made a decision. I was done. Done being invisible. Done being taken for granted. Done being treated like my feelings, my wants, my life didn't matter. They thought I needed them? I was about to show them exactly how wrong they were. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and walked into the living room with a plate of cookies I'd baked, smiling like I hadn't heard a word. Coffee and dessert, anyone? They all turned to me with those fake smiles, those guilty expressions of people who'd just been talking about someone behind their back. But they took the cookies, accepted the coffee, and continued on like nothing had happened. I played along. I smiled, I served, I cleaned up. I hugged them all goodbye and told them I loved them, and they echoed the words back with the ease of people who'd been saying them without meaning them for years. When they left, I closed the door, locked it, and stood in the sudden silence of my home. Then I walked to my office, opened my laptop and started planning. If they thought I was weak, dependent, someone they could manipulate and manage, I was going to prove them wrong. But I wasn't going to argue or defend myself. I was going to show them through actions. I spent the next week doing research. I looked into my finances, which I'd always managed carefully. I had a good retirement fund, investments, and yes, significant equity in my house. I also had skills, decades of administrative experience, bookkeeping expertise, and a sharp mind that hadn't dulled with age despite what my children apparently thought. Then I called Patricia. I need your advice, I told her. If you wanted to start a new chapter in your life, completely independent, what would you do? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, first, I'd ask myself what I really want. Not what anyone else thinks I should want, but what would make me happy. What do you want, Eleanor? What did I want? I wanted to matter. I wanted to be seen as a person, not just a resource. I wanted to live my life for me, not for children who didn't appreciate me. I wanted freedom from the constant ache of feeling invisible to the people I'd given everything to. I want to prove that I don't need anyone, I said. I want to show them that I'm not some dependent old woman they need to manage. Then do it, Patricia said simply. Eleanor, you're one of the most capable people I know. The only person who doesn't see that is you. That night I made a list. Not a list of grievances, but a list of possibilities. What could I do with my life if I stopped waiting for my children to value me? If I stopped organizing my world around their convenience? The list grew longer than I expected. I could travel. I'd never traveled, always putting aside money for my children's needs instead of my own wants. I could volunteer, put my skills to use helping people who'd actually appreciate the help. I could take classes, learn new things, pursue interests I'd shelved decades ago. I could downsize if I wanted to, but on my terms, when and how I chose, not because my children decided it was convenient for them. I could live. Really live. Not just exist in the margins of other people's lives. But first I needed to send a message. A clear, undeniable message that Eleanor was not someone to be dismissed, managed, or taken for granted. I started with small changes. I'd always been available. Always answered calls immediately. Always responded to texts right away. I stopped. When Michael called 2 days after the dinner, I let it go to voicemail. When Jennifer texted, I waited hours before responding with short, polite replies. Is everything okay, Mom? David asked when he finally called after I'd been unavailable for a week. Everything's fine, I said cheerfully. Just busy. Busy with what? He sounded confused, like the concept of me having a life outside of being his mother was foreign. Just things, I said vaguely. How are you? We talked for 5 minutes before he had to go. He didn't notice that I hadn't really told him anything about what I was doing. He'd never learned to truly listen to me because I'd never demanded that he do so. That was going to change. I started spending more time with Patricia and her circle of friends, women my age who were vibrant, active, living full lives. They went to book clubs, took day trips, volunteered together. They invited me to join them and I said yes. For the first time in decades, I had a social life that had nothing to do with my children. I joined a local theater group that put on community productions. I'd always loved theater but had never had time for it, while raising my children and working multiple jobs. Now I had time. I auditioned for a small part in their next production and got it. I started taking an online course in digital marketing. The world had changed so much and I wanted to understand it. I wanted to keep my mind sharp, keep learning. I discovered I was good at it, better than some people half my age. I volunteered at a local literacy center, teaching adults to read. The gratitude I received from those students, the genuine appreciation they showed for my time and effort, was more fulfilling than anything I'd experienced with my children in years. I was building a life, a real life, for me. And my children started to notice. Mom, I've been trying to call you all week, Michael said, irritation clear in his voice. Where have you been? Out, I said simply. Out where? Just out. Living my life. Was there something you needed, Michael? The question hung in the air. Because we both knew he'd called because he needed something, not because he wanted to connect with me. No, I just wanted to check on you, he lied. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I have to go, though. I have rehearsal. Rehearsal? For the play I'm in. Bye, Michael. I hung up before he could respond. Felt liberating. Jennifer called next. Mom, David said you're acting weird. What's going on? Nothing's going on. I'm just busy with my own life. Is that weird? Well, you're usually so available. Maybe I don't want to be so available anymore, I said. Maybe I have better things to do than wait around for my children to remember I exist. There was a long silence. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk, Jennifer? Not because you needed something or wanted to vent about your life, but because you actually wanted to know how I was doing. She couldn't answer. That's what I thought, I said. I need to go. I have plans. Plans with who? Friends. I've made friends, Jennifer. People who actually want to spend time with me, not because they have to, but because they like me. I hung up, my heart pounding. a smile spreading across my face despite the tremor in my hands. I was doing it. I was standing up for myself. But I wasn't done. Not even close. 3 weeks after the family dinner, I received an email from Michael. It was formal, almost businesslike, which was bizarre for a message from my son. "Mom," it read. "We've all been discussing your living situation. We think it's time to have a serious conversation about your future. The house is too much for you to manage alone, and we're concerned about you. We've found some really nice assisted living communities that we think you should consider. We can help you sell the house and transition to something more appropriate for this stage of your life. Let's set up a time to discuss this as a family. Love, Michael." I read it 3 times, feeling my anger build with each word. More appropriate for this stage of your life. Assisted living communities. They were actually trying to push me into an old folks' home so they could get their hands on my house. And they thought I'd just agree because I always agreed to everything. I didn't respond to the email. Instead, I called my financial advisor, Martin, whom I'd been working with for years. "Martin, I need to understand exactly what my financial situation is. Every asset, every investment, every option available to me." We spent 2 hours on the phone. What I learned surprised even me. Between my retirement funds, investments, savings, and home equity, I was actually quite financially secure. More secure than my children probably realized because I'd never talked about money with them. "Eleanor, you're in excellent shape financially," Martin said. "You could actually do quite a lot with these assets if you wanted to. Have you thought about what you want your next phase to look like?" I had. I've been thinking about it constantly. "I want to be independent," I told him. "Completely independent. I want to make sure my children understand that I don't need them for anything." Martin was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor, this is just my opinion as someone who's worked with you for years, but you've always put everyone else first. Maybe it's time to put yourself first. You've earned it." His words settled something inside me. I had earned it. I'd spent decades sacrificing, giving, supporting everyone else. It was time to support myself. Over the next few weeks, I put together a plan. A real plan, not a fantasy. A plan that would prove to my children, and to myself, that Eleanor was nobody's burden. I researched volunteer organizations that needed experienced administrators. I found 3 that were looking for exactly my skill set. These weren't local organizations. They were international NGOs that sent volunteers to different countries to help set up systems, train local staff, and provide expertise. I applied to all 3. Within a week, I had 2 offers. One was in Costa Rica, helping establish administrative systems for an environmental conservation organization. The other was in Portugal, working with a literacy program similar to what I'd been volunteering with locally. I chose Portugal. 6-month commitment, all expenses paid, plus a small stipend. It was perfect. But before I accepted, I needed to make sure my affairs were in order. I spoke with my lawyer about updating my will. I wanted it crystal clear that my assets would be distributed according to my wishes, not my children's assumptions. I arranged for Patricia to look after my house while I was gone. I'd rent it to a nice young couple who were relocating for work. They'd pay rent that would cover the mortgage and upkeep with some left over. My house would be fine, generating income even, and my children would have no say in any of it. Then I planned the announcement. I invited all 3 of my children to lunch. Just lunch, nothing fancy, at a nice restaurant downtown. I told them I had something important to discuss about my future. They all came, clearly thinking this was when I'd finally agreed to their plan to downsize me into irrelevance. I could see it in their faces when they arrived, that mixture of relief and self-satisfaction, like they'd won a battle I didn't know we were fighting. We ordered food. We made small talk. Jennifer talked about her latest project. Michael complained about a difficult client. David mentioned he was thinking about buying a vacation home. Clarissa and Vanessa exchanged the kind of knowing looks that made it clear they'd discussed me before this lunch, probably strategizing how to handle me. None of them asked how I was doing. Not really. None of them seemed to notice the changes in me, that I was wearing new clothes, had gotten a new haircut, looked healthier and happier than I had in years. After the food arrived, Michael cleared his throat. "So, Mom, I think you know why we're all here. We need to talk about your living situation." "Actually," I said, smiling, "I invited you here. And yes, I want to talk about my living situation." My future, actually. They all leaned in, looking expectant. This was it, they thought. She's finally going to be reasonable. I've made some decisions, I continued, keeping my voice calm and cheerful. And I wanted to let you all know because you're my children and I love you. But I want to be clear. These are my decisions already made, not open for discussion. Michael frowned. Mom, we should discuss. I held up my hand. No. You'll listen and then you can respond. But nothing you say will change what I've decided. The table fell silent. They weren't used to this version of me. The one who set boundaries, who took charge, who didn't immediately defer to what they thought was best. First, I said, I'm not selling my house. Not now, possibly not ever. But certainly not because you've decided it's more convenient for you if I do. Mom, that's not, Jennifer started. I'm not finished, I said firmly. I'm also not moving into assisted living. I'm 72, not 92, and I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. More capable than any of you seem to realize. We're just worried, David tried. If you were worried about me, you would have noticed that I had surgery 3 years ago. Alone. You would have noticed that I spent the last Christmas crying alone in my house because none of you could be bothered to spend more than an hour with me. You would have noticed that I've been pulling away because I'm tired of being taken for granted. Their faces showed shock. I'd never spoken to them like this. Never. The truth is, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion rising in my chest, you're not worried about me. You're worried about my house, about what you think you're entitled to, about managing me in whatever way is most convenient for you. But I'm not a problem to be managed. I'm your mother. And I deserve better than to be discussed behind my back like I'm a burden. We never said, Michael started, but his face was red. Yes, you did. At the family dinner 6 weeks ago when you thought I couldn't hear you. She needs us more than we need her. I quoted Jennifer's words back to them, watching their faces pale. You all laughed. You discussed manipulating me into thinking downsizing was my idea. You talked about me like I was an inconvenient problem. The silence at the table was deafening. Other diners were starting to glance over, but I didn't care. So here's what's actually happening with my future, I said. I've accepted a 6-month volunteer position in Portugal. I leave in 2 weeks. I'm going to use my skills and experience to help people who actually need and appreciate help. People who see me as valuable, not as a burden. Portugal. Jennifer looked stunned. For 6 months? That's crazy, Mom. You can't just. I can and I am, I said. I've rented out my house to cover expenses. I've arranged everything. Patricia will keep an eye on things here. And before you ask, no, you cannot stay at my house while I'm gone. It's rented. This is ridiculous, Vanessa said, speaking for the first time. You're being impulsive and emotional. You're not thinking clearly. I turned to her slowly. Vanessa, with all due respect, you don't get a vote. You've made it clear over the years that I'm not really welcome in your life or your home. So my life choices are certainly none of your business. She gasped, looking at Michael for support. He just sat there speechless. And Clarissa, I said, turning to David's girlfriend, you've been trying to cut me out of my son's life since you met him. You suggested I stay in a hotel rather than in his guest room when I visited. You closed the door in my face at his birthday party. So you also don't get an opinion on my choices. Clarissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish. David looked between us, clearly torn and uncomfortable. Mom, this is not like you, Michael finally said. You're usually so calm, so reasonable. I've been a doormat, I corrected. There's a difference. I've spent decades being reasonable, which apparently meant letting you all treat me like I don't matter. That ends now. We don't treat you like you don't matter, Jennifer said, but her voice lacked conviction. Really? When was the last time you called just to see how I was? When did any of you thank me for everything I sacrificed to give you the lives you have? When did any of you consider my feelings, my wants, my needs? None of them could answer. I worked 3 jobs to put you through college, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I took out loans I'll probably be paying off until I die. I missed sleep, meals, and any semblance of a personal life to make sure you had every opportunity. I was there for every game, every recital, every important moment in your lives. And what have I gotten in return? Sporadic phone calls when you need something. Visits where you can't be bothered to put down your phones. Criticism of my home, my lifestyle, my very existence. That's not fair, Michael said, but he couldn't meet my eyes. Isn't it? Tell me I'm wrong, Michael. Tell me you've made me a priority in your life. Tell me Vanessa hasn't actively worked to keep me away from my grandchildren. Tell me that you've ever, even once, stood up for me when she criticized me. He couldn't, because it was true. I turned to Jennifer. Tell me you've invited me to be part of your life in New York. Tell me I'm not just a free therapist you call when you need to vent. Tell me you've ever asked about my life, my interests, my dreams. She looked down at her plate, tears forming in her eyes. But I wasn't done. David, tell me you've put me before Clarissa even once. Tell me you stood up for me when she closed the door in my face. Tell me you've made any effort to include me in your life beyond obligatory holidays. He opened his mouth but no words came out. I thought so, I said quietly. Here's the truth. I don't need you. I've been fine on my own for years while you all drifted away. But you? You've built your lives on the foundation I provided, and you've never even acknowledged it. You think I'm dependent on you? You've got it backwards. Every success you've had, every opportunity you've seized, was only possible because I sacrificed everything to give you those chances. I stood up, pulling my purse over my shoulder. I'm going to Portugal. While I'm gone, I want you to think about the kind of relationship you want with me going forward. Because when I get back, things are going to be different. I'm not going to be the mother who accepts whatever scraps of attention you're willing to give. I'm not going to be invisible anymore. I'm not going to let you treat me like a burden or an obligation. Mom, please sit down, Michael said, looking around at the other diners who were definitely watching now. We can talk about this. We just did, I said. And I'm done talking. I have packing to do. Enjoy your lunch. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, leaving my 3 children and their partners sitting in stunned silence. My hands were shaking, and I could feel tears threatening, but I didn't let them fall. Not until I got to my car. Then I sat in the driver's seat and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of relief, of liberation. I had finally stood up for myself. I had finally told them the truth. And it felt incredible. Over the next 2 weeks my phone rang constantly. Michael called at least twice a day. Jennifer sent long text messages. David showed up at my door unannounced. I answered some calls. I responded to some texts. But I didn't back down, didn't soften my stance, didn't apologize for finally demanding to be treated with respect. Mom, we're sorry, Michael said during one call. We didn't realize you felt this way. That's the problem, Michael, I told him. You should have realized. You should have been paying attention. I shouldn't have had to spell it out for you that your mother deserves basic respect and consideration. We do respect you, he insisted. Do you? Then prove it. Not with words but with actions. Show me that you value me, that you see me as a person, not just as a resource or an obligation. Show me that my feelings matter to you. Jennifer came to visit, actually came to my house 3 days before I was set to leave. She stood in my living room, the same living room where she'd grown up, where I'd comforted her through heartbreaks and celebrated her successes, and she cried. I didn't know you felt invisible, she said. I thought you were just, I don't know, content being on your own. You never complained. You always seemed fine. I shouldn't have to complain for you to check on me, I said gently but firmly. And I've been pretending to be fine because I didn't want to be a burden. But that's not healthy for either of us. You need to understand that parents have needs too. We're not just these unchanging, indestructible fixtures in your life. We're people. We hurt. We need love and attention and respect just like anyone else. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know, I said. But sorry isn't enough. I need you to do better. I need all of you to do better. David was the hardest. He came by the night before I left alone. Clarissa wasn't with him, which I appreciated. I talked to Clarissa, he said, about how she's treated you. We're not together anymore. I blinked in surprise. David, I didn't want. No, it's not because of you, he said quickly. Or maybe it is, but in a good way. When you said all that at lunch, it made me really look at my relationship. And I realized that someone who couldn't respect my mother wasn't someone I wanted to build a life with. She was never going to be kind to you, and I finally saw that that was a reflection on her character, not on you. Tears filled my eyes. Oh, David. I've been a terrible son, he said, his voice cracking. You were always there for me, always, and I just took you for granted. I let Clarissa dictate how we treated you, and that was wrong. I'm so sorry, Mom. I hugged him, this youngest child of mine who'd been my baby once. Thank you for saying that. And for seeing it. That means more than you know. Are you still going to Portugal? He asked. Yes, I said firmly. This isn't about punishing you. This is about me finally living my life. This is about me doing something for myself, being seen and valued for who I am, not just for being someone's mother. Will you come back? His voice was small, vulnerable, like the little boy he used to be. Of course I'm coming back, I said. This is my home. But when I do come back, things are going to be different. I'm going to keep living my life, pursuing my interests, spending time with people who value me. And I hope you'll all be part of that, but on new terms. Equal terms. Terms where my needs matter as much as yours. He nodded, wiping his eyes. I'll do better. I promise. The next morning, Patricia drove me to the airport. We'd become close friends over the past months, closer than I'd ever been with anyone outside my family. She understood what I was doing, why I needed to do it. You're incredibly brave, she said as we said goodbye at departures. Not many people have the courage to change their lives at 72. I should have done it years ago, I said. But better late than never. You're going to have an amazing time, she said, hugging me tight. And when you get back, we're all going to want to hear every detail. I boarded the plane with a mixture of nervousness and excitement I hadn't felt in decades. I was actually doing this. I was flying to Portugal, to a completely new experience, to a life where I was valued for my skills and contributions, not just tolerated as someone's mother. The first month in Portugal was challenging. Everything was new, the language, the culture, the work. But it was also exhilarating. I was learning, growing, being challenged in ways I hadn't been in years. The organization I worked with was incredible. They valued my experience, listened to my ideas, implemented my suggestions. I was helping set up systems that would serve the local community for years. I was making a real difference, and people actually noticed and appreciated it. I made friends, other volunteers from around the world, local staff members who welcomed me warmly. We'd have dinners together, explore the city, share stories about our lives. They asked about my children, and when I told them the abbreviated version of why I was there, they understood. Family can be complicated, Maria, one of the local program directors, said. Sometimes the people we love most take us for granted, because they've never had to imagine life without us. You're teaching them a valuable lesson. I hope so, I said. I hope they're learning that love isn't just about being there when it's convenient. It's about showing up, paying attention, valuing the person. My children called regularly, more regularly than they had in years. Michael actually video called once a week, and he'd ask real questions about my life, my work, my experiences. He told me about Tyler and Emma, about his business, and for the first time in a long time our conversations felt reciprocal. Jennifer started sending emails about her art, but they were different now. She'd ask my opinion, actually wait for my response, engage with my thoughts instead of just using me as a sounding board. David called most often. He'd met someone new, a woman named Sophie who he said reminded him of me. She's kind and strong, he told me. And she called me out when I was being thoughtless just like you did. I think you'll really like her. I look forward to meeting her, I said. And I meant it. The 6 months passed both quickly and slowly. There were moments of homesickness, times when I missed my house, my routine, even the complicated dynamics with my children. But there were more moments of joy, of satisfaction, of feeling like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When it was time to return home, I felt different, lighter, more confident, more certain of my worth. Patricia picked me up from the airport, and I hugged her like we'd been separated for years, not months. Welcome home, world traveler, she said, grinning. My house looked perfect. The renters had taken good care of it, and Patricia had made sure everything was ready for my return. I walked through the rooms, feeling like I was seeing them with new eyes. This was still my home, but I was different now. Stronger. More sure of myself. The next day, I invited my children over. All of them without their partners. Just my 3 kids and me. They arrived looking nervous, unsure of what to expect. I'd made lunch, nothing fancy, just sandwiches and salad, and we sat in my kitchen where I'd raised them, where I'd packed countless school lunches and helped with countless homework assignments. "Welcome back, Mom," Michael said. "We missed you." "I missed you too," I said honestly. "But I want to talk about what happens next. About what our relationships look like going forward." They nodded, waiting. "I love you all," I said. "I always have and I always will. But love isn't enough if it's one-sided. If I'm always giving and you're always taking, that's not a relationship. That's exploitation, even if it's unintentional." "We know," Jennifer said quietly. "We've been talking about it. About how we treated you, about how we took you for granted." "Good," I said. "Because here are my expectations. I want regular contact, but it has to be real. Not just calls when you need something. Not just texts to assuage guilt. Real conversations where you ask about my life and actually listen to the answers." They nodded. "I want respect," I continued. "That means your partners need to treat me with basic courtesy. That means I get invited to important events. That means my home and my choices aren't criticized unless I ask for your input." "That's fair," David said. "And I want independence," I said. "I'm not going to organize my life around your convenience. I have my own interests, my own friends, my own plans. Sometimes I won't be available when you call. Sometimes I'll be busy. And that's okay because I'm a person with a life, not just your mother." "We want that for you," Michael said. "We really do, Mom. We've realized over the past 6 months how much we took you for granted. How we treated you like you'd always be there. Always be available. Always put us first. I will always love you and want the best for you," I said. "But I'm also going to love myself and want the best for me. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive." We talked for hours that day. Really talked, maybe for the first time in years. They asked about Portugal and I shared stories and photos. I asked about their lives, and they opened up in ways they hadn't before. They apologized genuinely for specific things they'd done and said. They made commitments to do better. And I could see they meant it. Over the following months things did change. Not overnight and not perfectly but genuinely. Michael and Vanessa invited me to their house, and Vanessa actually apologized for how she treated me. She explained that she'd felt threatened by my close relationship with Michael, and had tried to create distance between us as a defense mechanism. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation, and it was honest. We agreed to start fresh, to build a relationship based on mutual respect. Jennifer invited me to New York for a weekend, and it was wonderful. She showed me her studio, introduced me to her friends, and actually included me in her world. We went to galleries together, and she explained her work with patience and enthusiasm, never once suggesting I wouldn't understand. We talked about art, about life, about our relationship. She cried and told me she'd been so focused on building her career that she'd forgotten the person who'd made that career possible. David brought Sophie to meet me, and I liked her immediately. She was warm, intelligent, and she treated me with genuine respect and interest. "David's told me so much about what you did for him growing up," she said. "You're kind of his hero, and I can see why." It was the first time anyone connected to my children had acknowledged my sacrifices without making it feel like a burden. More importantly, they started showing up. Not just physically but emotionally. Michael called me every Sunday and we'd talk for an hour about everything and nothing. Jennifer sent me photos of her latest work and asked for my thoughts, actually engaging with my feedback. David came to visit once a month, sometimes with Sophie, sometimes alone, and we'd spend the day together doing simple things, walking in the park, having lunch, just being together. They started treating me like a person they wanted in their lives, not an obligation they had to manage. I also continued building my own life. I went back to Portugal for another 3-month stint the following year. I joined the theater group permanently and performed in several productions. I took more online courses and even started doing freelance consulting for small nonprofits, using my administrative skills to help organizations that couldn't afford full-time staff. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed about: Ireland, Italy, Greece. Sometimes I went alone, sometimes with Patricia and our group of friends, once with Jennifer, who took a week off work specifically to spend time with me in Paris. I was living. Really truly living. Not in the margins of other people's lives, but in the full, vibrant center of my own life. About a year after I returned from Portugal, we had another family dinner at my house. But this time it was different. Everyone actually wanted to be there. Vanessa brought flowers and helped me set the table without being asked. Jennifer put her phone away entirely. David and Sophie brought wine and stories about their recent camping trip. Michael's children, now older, actually engaged with me, asking about my travels and telling me about school. We laughed together. We talked about real things. We made plans for the future, plans that included me not as an afterthought but as an integral part. At one point, Michael raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said. "To Mom. We spent years taking you for granted, treating you like you'd always be there no matter how we acted. But you taught us an important lesson, that love requires effort, that relationships are about mutual respect, and that everyone, including mothers, deserves to be valued." "To Mom," they all echoed, raising their glasses. "To standing up for yourself," Jennifer added. "You showed us what strength really looks like. Not being a doormat, not accepting whatever treatment people give you, but demanding the respect you deserve." "To new beginnings," David said. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we deserved it." I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were good tears. Happy tears. Tears of validation and relief and love. "To family," I said. "Real family, built on respect and effort and genuine care. Not obligation, not guilt, not convenience, but real love." We clinked glasses, and as I looked around the table at my 3 children, their partners, my grandchildren, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, truly seen, truly valued, truly loved. That night, after everyone left, I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd overheard those painful words a year and a half earlier, and smiled. They'd said I needed them more than they needed me. They'd laughed at the idea that I could stand on my own, but I'd proven them wrong. I'd shown them that Eleanor wasn't weak, wasn't dependent, wasn't someone to be managed or dismissed. I'd shown them that I was a complete person with my own dreams, my own strength, my own life. More importantly, I'd shown myself. Patricia called later that evening. "How was dinner?" "Perfect," I said. "Really genuinely perfect. They're actually trying now. They're showing up, paying attention, treating me like I matter." "Because you demanded it," Patricia said. "You set boundaries, you stood up for yourself, and you showed them what happens when they take you for granted." "I'm proud of you, Eleanor." "I'm proud of me too," I said, and I meant it. Looking back, I can see now that the moment I overheard my children in the kitchen was both the worst and best thing that could have happened. It broke my heart, yes, but it also broke me free from a pattern that was slowly destroying my sense of self-worth. I'd spent so many years being strong for everyone else that I'd forgotten to be strong for myself. I'd equated love with sacrifice, with always giving and never asking. I'd taught my children that my needs didn't matter by never expressing them, never demanding respect, never setting boundaries. But that night in the kitchen, when I heard Jennifer say, "She needs us more than we need her," something shifted. The pain of those words cracked open something inside me, and through that crack, light finally got in. I realized that I didn't need them, not in the desperate, dependent way they assumed. I'd been surviving and managing on my own while they'd been absent from my life. But they'd needed me their entire lives, and they'd never had to imagine a world where I wasn't there, strong and available and endlessly giving. So I stopped being endlessly available. I stopped being the mother who accepted whatever scraps of attention they were willing to give. I stopped pretending I was fine when I wasn't. I stopped being invisible. And something miraculous happened. When I started valuing myself, they started valuing me too. When I demanded respect, they learned to give it. When I built my own life and stopped organizing my world around their convenience, they actually started making effort to be part of my life. The irony isn't lost on me. For years, I thought that being a good mother meant always being there, always sacrificing, always putting them first. But in doing so, I'd inadvertently taught them that I didn't matter, that my feelings weren't important, that they could treat me however they wanted and I'd still be there. It was only when I stopped accepting that treatment, when I stood up and said no more, when I walked away and proved I could thrive without them, that they finally understood what they'd been losing. They'd laughed at the idea that I needed them more than they needed me. But the truth was so much more complex than that simple, cruel statement. We all need each other, that's what family should be. Not a one-way street where one person gives endlessly and everyone else takes. Not a relationship built on obligation and guilt. But a genuine reciprocal connection where everyone's needs matter, where everyone makes effort, where everyone is valued. That's what we have now. Not perfect, we still have our moments, our misunderstandings, our challenges. But it's real. It's built on mutual respect and genuine care. It's built on the understanding that I'm not just their mother. I'm Eleanor, a person with dreams and needs and value beyond my role in their lives. A few months ago, Tyler, Michael's son, who's now 15, asked me about Portugal. We were sitting on my porch and he'd been quiet for a while before he spoke. "Grandma, Dad told me about why you went to Portugal. About how they all took you for granted." I looked at him surprised. "Did he?" "Yeah." He said it was one of the most important lessons he ever learned. That just because someone loves you doesn't mean they'll accept being treated badly. That everyone deserves respect, even parents. "That's true," I said quietly. "I think what you did was really brave," Tyler said. "My friends all complain about their parents and grandparents, but they still expect them to just always be there, always do stuff for them. But you taught Dad that it doesn't work that way. That relationships take effort from everyone." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you, Tyler. That means a lot. I want you to know that I see you," he said, with the earnestness only a teenager can have. "Not just as Dad's mom or my grandma, but as a person. And I think you're pretty cool. The Portugal thing, the plays, all the traveling, you're living your life. That's awesome." I hugged him, this grandson who'd been kept at a distance from me for so many years, who was now choosing to see me, to know me, to value me. "You're pretty cool yourself, Tyler." That conversation encapsulated everything I'd fought for. Not just respect from my children, but a fundamental shift in how our family understood relationships. Tyler was learning at 15, something my children hadn't understood until they were in their 40s, that love requires effort, that people deserve respect, that no one should be taken for granted. I was breaking a cycle, not just for my children but for my grandchildren too. Last week I signed up for another volunteer stint, this time in Greece, helping with refugee education programs. It's 6 months starting next spring. When I told my children, there was no panic, no attempts to talk me out of it, no suggestions that I was being impulsive or irresponsible. Instead, Michael said, "That's amazing, Mom. You're going to do incredible work there." Jennifer said, "Can I come visit you while you're there? Maybe spend a week, actually spend time together." David said, "You're an inspiration. Seriously. Sophie and I were just talking about how you're living the most interesting, fulfilling life of anyone we know. Their support, their genuine excitement for my adventures, their understanding that my life doesn't revolve around being available to them. That's the victory. Not the dramatic confrontation in the restaurant, not walking away to Portugal, not even standing up for myself, though all of those things were necessary. The real victory is this. I am seen. I am valued. I am respected. And I did that. Not by waiting for them to change, not by hoping they'd eventually realize my worth, but by standing up, setting boundaries and showing them and myself that Eleanor is strong enough to demand better." They'd laughed and said, "She needs us more than we need her." But I surpassed them all. Not in success or wealth or achievement, but in something far more important. I surpassed their expectations. I surpassed their assumptions. I surpassed the limited vision they had of who I was and what I was capable of. I became fully myself. Not just their mother, not just the strong one who held everything together, not just the woman who sacrificed everything for others. I became Eleanor. Complete, independent, valuable, strong, not because I could endure anything but because I finally learned to stand up for myself. And that, I've discovered, is the greatest strength of all. They thought I needed them. But what I really needed was to believe in my own worth, to demand respect, to build a life that was truly mine. I needed to learn that being a good mother didn't mean accepting poor treatment. I needed to understand that love without respect isn't really love at all. I surpassed them by surpassing their expectations, yes. But more importantly, I surpassed the version of myself who believed that suffering in silence was strength, that endless sacrifice was love, that being invisible was the price of being needed. I'm 74 now, and I've never been happier, never been more fulfilled, never been more certain of my value. My children are part of my life, but they're not my whole life. I have friends, interests, adventures, purpose, all my own. And when I look in the mirror now, I don't just see someone's mother. I see Eleanor. Strong, brave, worthy, complete. They laughed at me once thinking I was weak and dependent. But I proved them wrong. And in doing so, I finally proved to myself what I should have known all along. I am enough. I have always been enough. Not because of what I do for others, but because of who I am. That's my victory. That's how I surpassed them all. Not by becoming someone new, but by finally, beautifully, courageously becoming fully myself.